Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the first month and 14th day by the end of the calendar in the 17th year of Chunki. Tim Miller sitting in for the second king of Chungu, Kyungjin Moon. And yeah, we've got a war going on, don't we? Yeah. Okay, we talked about it on Saturday. We'll talk about it again, but especially in times like this, it's important to maintain our routine. Let's go to see what's going on around the kingdom right now. In Chongpyeong, Tennessee, we have 48 degrees and light rain, and that rain is going to continue for at least 60 minutes, it says. Cooler with rain today, high of 58. Tonight, partly cloudy with a couple of showers, low of 41. Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan Province in Korea, 38 degrees and mostly cloudy. And their rain is going to start in a bit, right about what? Not a little bit. Anyway, a little bit. It'll start raining. It'll start raining there as well, but not a lot. They're going to have a low of 35 tonight, rain and snow showers this evening with little or no accumulation, otherwise cloudy, and a high of 47 tomorrow, clouds and sunshine. And at the Cheonryugun Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, 12 degrees right now. Yeah, 12 degrees and mostly cloudy. Yes, that's Pennsylvania. And today a high of 37, sunny much of the time, the coldest day until next winter. You promise? Okay. You can take that with as many grains of salt as you wish. Tonight, increasing amounts of clouds and low of 22. So they're saying it's not going to get any colder this spring. We shall see. Anyway, Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, 61 and mostly cloudy. 80 for high today, breezy this morning, otherwise mostly cloudy and very warm. Tonight, partly cloudy, breezy late, 64 for a low. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, lots of rain there, 45, and rain ending this evening, it says, mostly cloudy, low of 40. Tomorrow, partly sunny and high of 56. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, no rain there. I'm sorry, mostly cloudy, 53 now, but cloudy and evening shower in spots, followed by rain and drizzle late. Rain here as well. Low of 42 tonight, tomorrow cloudy and cooler, a touch of rain in the afternoon, high of 45. Isn't it interesting how we have rain at once all over the place? Guangzhou, Guangdong province, China. Oh, yes, rain here as well. Hold on. Cloudy and 68 right now and getting down to 59 tonight, partly to mostly cloudy. Tomorrow, cloudy and cooler. Rain in the afternoon, high of 64. Yes, that is interesting. We have rain, 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 rain. All right, and let's go to Father's Word. Okay. Ah, boy. Tell you what. Let's see here. Well, let's see here. All right, Father's talking about coastal cities. This is the book on Japan Pacific Providence, chapter one. Chapter one is titled "The 21st Century is the Era of the Oceans," as the Oceanic Era, and we're in section 2.1.1. Okay, and Father here speaking on September 13th, 1982. Saying that when coastal cities decline, the economy of that country also declines. And 그런데 자원을 가지고 해양 도시를 세계와 연결시킬 수 있는 기반이 있는데 그것이 안 됐으니 미국 정부는 긴급 조치를 취해야 할 단계에 들어왔다는 것입니다. So America has the resources to connect its coastal cities to the world, but they haven't done that. And now the American government is at a stage where it needs to take urgent steps in that direction. 해양 도시의 책임자들도 젊은 사람을 찾고 있는데 없으니 이것을 우리가 책임지는 것입니다. So, and they are looking for young people to take responsibility for coastal cities, but they can't find any, and so we are taking responsibility for that. 또 부인들이 도망 안 갈 수 있는 그런 사상을 가진 젊은 부부가 필요합니다. Also, they need uh, young couples. Okay, I'm gonna have to explain this one a little bit, but they need a young couple where the wife is not going to run away. So Father would often say that um, in secular marriages, the man gets on a ship, goes off to sea, and he doesn't come back for 6 months, a year, and the wives are left behind, and uh, they basically cheat on their marriage. They cheat on their husbands. And so he says that the Unification Church wives would never do that. And so um, uh, Unification Church young couples are going to prosper and eventually dominate in coastal cities around the world. Yes, that's Father's vision. Okay. All right. So now we've got this thing going on. All right. So now I'm sure you've heard most of what is going on. Of course, the supreme leader of Iran was killed, and that's been confirmed. Iran itself has confirmed that, and they've got his replacement already in there, and we can assume that he's being targeted as well. And President Trump said that he's saying that this situation will continue until all the objectives have been achieved, but he has also said that he would like to bring it to a close within 4 weeks. He may be about to find out that wars are easy to start, difficult to end. That has been the pattern in the past, but we will see whether that is the case here as well. Okay. And let's see, 3 fighter jets, U.S. fighter jets, were downed over Kuwait. And now they're saying that this is apparent friendly fire incident. In other words, either the U.S. or maybe the Kuwaitis shot down American fighters. But the pilots have all were able to get out of that situation, and they were not killed. They're alive apparently. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed, and traffic is not allowed. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is not allowing any traffic to go through that strait. And so that is having an effect on international oil prices as we expected. And let me just, I'm sure you must have already seen it by now. The Strait of Hormuz is this area right here. And as you can see, you have Iran, you have Iraq, you have Saudi Arabia, and this place here, we don't have a name, that's Kuwait. So a lot of oil gets produced in this area, and about 20% of the world's oil supply has to travel through this strait. And Iran has always said that if they get attacked by the U.S., they will close this strait, or Israel, if they're attacked by anyone, they will close this strait so as to put pressure on their attackers. And that's what has actually happened. They've closed that now so that the oil tankers cannot get through, either empty ones going in to pick up oil, or tankers with oil coming out cannot get through that. So the markets around the world are, of course, what shall we say, volatile? Yes. That's the word, right? Okay. So the U.S. stocks looks like I'm looking at the futures right now, and I'll show them to you. I think I can do that. The S&P is down. S&P and Dow are down about 1% or more. NASDAQ is down a little bit more than that. The Japanese stock market ended down about 2.5%. And the British stock market right now is down about 1%. Germany down. So everybody's down except for Shanghai. But Shanghai is closed. Not sure if today's a holiday for them or what, but anyway, okay. All right, and so, and also the interesting here in the foreign exchange market, the dollar is stronger. It's up against every currency except for the ruble, where it's basically steady. These, as I mentioned before, these downward red arrows show that the other currency is down. Okay, so that means the U.S. dollar is up. So euro is down against the dollar. The British pound is against the dollar, down against the dollar. Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, they're all down. But then here you switch. Here the USD comes first. So now USD is up against the Japanese yen. CNY is the Chinese currency, and then the Swiss, Canadian, Mexican, India, Brazil, and here Russia, and then Korea. And the DXY is the dollar index, index of the dollar against a basket of currency. So dollar is a stronger today, and that's expected. That always, well, pretty much always happens in an emergency like this. Everybody's suddenly wants to put their wealth in dollars because that is considered to be the safe haven, I guess you can say. And commodities, the gold is up more than 2% to about close to 5,400, and silver is also up about 1.25% to a little more than $95. So these are also sort of safe haven, considered safe haven assets. And I guess already oil prices rise more than most in 4 years. So they were up because they're up. Oil prices are up about 8% this morning, and so all this is pretty much expected. What was expected if war were to break out, and so that's exactly what is happening. Let's go to Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera. I want, in a case like this, it's good to look at various points of view. You hide. Okay. And here we have them saying a day after Iranian supreme leader killing was confirmed, attacks have been reported in Dubai, Cyprus, and across the region. Cyprus, okay. And here, a day after Iranian supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's killing was confirmed in attacks by the United States and Israel, Iran continues to strike U.S. assets across the Gulf region. The U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran on Saturday, while talks between Washington and Tehran over Iran's nuclear program were ongoing. So they're making the point that they were still talking. There was still possibility that the talks could yield something, but this whole thing began. And I think anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Iran hit back the same day with missiles and drones attacks across the region, including targets in Israel, as well as U.S. military assets in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq. Tensions continue to escalate on the third day of the conflict. Here is what things look like on Monday. So the Iran semi-official news agency MER reported that more than 20 people were killed in an attack on Nilufar Square in Tehran. And Trump said in a Fox News interview on Sunday that the joint U.S.-Israeli operation had killed 48 Iranian leaders. At least 2 people were killed in an enemy attack on the central city of Sanandaj, according to the Iranian Fars news agency. And the Australian foreign minister told local media on Monday that Canberra does not plan to join the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. And then on Monday morning, explosions were heard in the UAE capital Abu Dhabi, as well as in Qatar's capital Doha. And while Qatar was initially using the Patriot defense system to intercept incoming missiles and drones in its airspace, the Ministry of Defense said it is now deploying fighter planes to shoot them down over the waters of the Gulf. And Qatar said Iranian missiles hit 2 energy-related sites in the country with no reported injuries or fatalities. Oman's Maritime Security Center said the oil tanker MKD Vayam was attacked by an explosive-laden boat 52 nautical miles off Muscat's coast, that would be the Oman's capital, causing a fire and engine room explosion that killed at least 1 crew member. And so forth and so on. And the Reuters news agency reported a plume of smoke near the U.S. embassy in Kuwait. And so here, all sorts of attacks are happening. And Israeli military in Iran launched more missiles at Israel, and that air defenses were operating to intercept them. Israeli military said Iran launched. Okay. And in the U.S., Pete Hegseth will appear for a news conference at 8 a.m. That would be in about 45 minutes, marking the first time a top Trump official will face the media since the U.S. and Israel launched attacks on Iran on Saturday. On Sunday, U.S. military announced that 3 service members have been killed during its operation against Iran, the first U.S. casualties. And these apparently took place in Kuwait. And Kuwait is also where those fighters were downed, and I'm just wondering if there's any connection. I don't know. So anyway, President Trump promised to avenge the 3 American casualties, and he said that combat operations would continue until all objectives are achieved. All right, so that's pretty much, I think, also Cyprus. Uh, okay, so the U.S. has 2 sovereign base areas in the Cyprus. These are largely UK-owned territories within Cyprus, and so they're going to be used for defensive strikes on Iran. I see. And then, but then also, Shahed drone hit the UK's Royal Air Force base in Cyprus with a limited damage. Okay. All right. So we have this situation ongoing, and I guess now that it has started, um, we very well that I said that this is not something that Father would support. I'm sure he does not support it because this is a war between peoples of faith, involving peoples of faith, and Father always wants people of faith to get together to resist and uh, fight against godless communism. And so now that it has started, I'm sure he wants it to end as quickly as possible. When Khamenei was killed, the supreme leader was killed, I was hopeful that this might bring a um, bring a bring the war to an end more quickly than otherwise, and that may still happen. I don't know because apparently, if we believe what President Trump has said, the 48 leaders, including Khamenei, were killed in one blow. Apparently, they were having a meeting of a lot of sort of senior officials, and apparently we were told that this is the kind of meeting that happens only rarely, and so they decided uh, to do an unusual daytime raid uh, because that was an opportunity to knock out Iran's senior leadership. And I think I mentioned on Saturday that it was unusual that they had started the war in the daytime. They usually start these things in the nighttime. My question is, I'd like to know more about that meeting. Um, what what was the purpose of the meeting, and what were they discussing? Were they going to discuss an attack against the United States? President Trump has said that there was an imminent danger. In other words, if we don't attack now, they're going to attack us, and so we have to hit them, do unto them before they are able to do unto us, or something like that, right? It would be good to have some verification of that. And so far, we don't have verification, and actually, this BBC analyst or expert is arguing that the whole argument of self-defense of this war does not hold water. And without additional information, I think he has a point. So if the U.S. has information about that meeting, it would be good to somehow get it out. Maybe it'll take time, but at some point to get it out. I just don't want to go through this because it also gives an opinion that maybe not all of us are are going to be exposed to. A BBC expert has demolished Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's case for bombing Iran. Israel said the attacks were preemptive to stop Iran acquiring nuclear weapons and firing at them. In his statement announcing the bombing, Trump said, "Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime." And so this word imminent is, it means, well, you know what it means. It means that something's going to happen, in the next 5 minutes if we don't, or very quickly, unless we do something. But Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's international affairs editor, dismissed those arguments. And of course, BBC is a leftist outlet. We know that, and it's not surprising. They're, of course, very never Trump, ever Trump. And so it's not surprising that they would put this out. But anyway, let's take a look at what he's saying. He said Israel used the word preemptive to justify its attack, the largest in the Israeli Air Force history, according to the Israel Defense Forces. The evidence is that this is not a response to an imminent threat, which the word preemption implies. Instead, it is a war of choice. And this is the Democrats' slogan now. It's their talking point. They're saying, "Oh, this is President Trump's war of choice." And unless President Trump and Israel can come up with more information, then it may be difficult to disprove this. Well, we'll see. The military action, Bowen said, was another blow to the tottering system of international law. Well, okay, yeah. And this system of international law, we're not surprised that it's tottering and being destroyed because it is part of the satanic world that is right now crumbling before our eyes. And a new international system is going to come out of this, we know, or not just this, but this is part of that process. He added in their statements both, but that doesn't, justify. We cannot justify this war saying, hey, something like this is necessary for the Cheongsam Constitution to be accepted by the world. I don't think so. We need people of faith. More important that people of faith are coming together to fight against communism. He added in their statements both Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran was a danger to their countries. Trump said it was a global danger. The Islamic regime is certainly their bitter enemy, but it is hard to see how the legal justification of self-defense applies, given the huge disparity of power between the U.S. and Israel on one side and Iran on the other. Well, I don't know if that's really a valid argument, because a weaker power can certainly do a lot of damage, even against a stronger power. As well, for example, in 9/11, we saw that a very few number of people were able of course, there was other things involved there, but eventually, though, they were the immediate and direct cause for the deaths of 3,000 people in the World Trade Center and others in Pennsylvania, and also in Washington, D.C. So, this kind of asymmetric attack does kill a lot of people. And so I don't think that you can use the disparity of power to argue against this war. I'm not happy with the war, and if they had asked me, I would told them don't do it. But I don't think you can use this huge disparity of power argument to say that it's a bad thing. Bowen also warned that Trump's stated objective of regime change in Iran will be far from straightforward and could lead to a wider conflict in the Middle East. He said there is no precedent for regime change happening just because of airstrikes. Well, Trump may say, well, look at Venezuela, but it's not really a regime change, is it? But this man is correct that I think that air power alone is not going to bring about a regime change. And so it requires boots on the ground, but President Trump is counting on the people of Iran to be the boots on the ground, as opposed to U.S. having to send in actual military people. So he's calling on the people of Iran to rise up and take charge of their government, to take over their government. And the son of the last Shah of Iran is doing his best to try and stay relevant and try and stay ahead of this thing and stay in front of this movement and kind of position himself to be the new leader of Iran. That's what he's been waiting for all these years. We'll see about that, right? We'll see about that. Former royalty, when they return after decades of being away, they tend not to be, welcomed so much. Unless he already has some kind of a support base within the country. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But yes, there could be a period of perhaps even civil war, or at least a political struggle within Iran to see who's going to take charge. In Korea, when the Japanese surrendered on August 15th, 1945, and suddenly left, and there was a power vacuum, the U.S. actually didn't come in for a few weeks. And when they did, it was the U.S. that decided that Syngman Rhee would be in charge. They could have given it to someone else, but they decided Syngman Rhee was going to be the guy. And so that was a case where, an occupying force sort of decided, okay, this guy is it. In Japan proper, it was different because in Japan proper, the political process was still working. There was still, the legislature was still working, and they were able to choose a prime minister and so forth. But in Korea, there was no political process because Japan had taken over all that. So we'll see what happens in Iran. If the existing regime is completely discredited, then I would think that also the legislature, as whatever it may be, is also discredited. I think it's basically a rubber stamp legislature. So how are they going to choose a new leader? How are they going to choose, right? Normally, when this happens, it's the guy with the most number of guns. That's what it boils down to, right? Most number of guns. And ever since the fall, that's been the case. At first, it was the guy with the biggest rock, and then the guy with the biggest club, and then eventually the one with the longest spear or sword, and eventually the one with the most number of guns, the most powerful guns. So we'll see what happens in Iran if the U.S. and Israel really stay out of the political process of choosing a new leader, which they might not. Israel might want to go in there and somehow manipulate the process to have someone that they're interested in. But one thing we do know is that there's not going to be a Western-style democracy. I think we can rule that out. The reason I rule that out is because political systems always come out of the existing political culture eventually, even though they may mask it somehow, and pretend that they're doing democracy, but like in Japan, okay, like in Japan, where you have this same party governing Japan for 80 years. Okay, a few years where they were not, but for the most part, the same party. That's unthinkable in an actual democracy, but that's what's been going on in Japan. So the political process, the cultural political sort of tradition has to give rise, has to express itself in some kind of government, and we'll have to see what that is. And I don't know. Maybe they will accept the king, the Shah. I don't know. Maybe they will. But anyway, yes, there's certainly, I think air power alone is not going to be enough, and we'll see what the Iranian people decide to do. And he says here, even if, and the BBC guy says, even if this becomes the first case of air power alone collapsing a regime, the Islamic regime will not be replaced by a liberal democracy that upholds human rights. Yes, okay. Most likely that's true. There's no credible alternative government in exile waiting in the wings. True. The Middle East expert went on. Iran's remaining leaders will now be calculating how to ride out the war, how to survive, and how to manage its consequences. Okay, true. Their neighbors, led by Saudi Arabia, will be dismayed by the huge uncertainty and potential consequences of today's events. Given the capacity of the Middle East to export trouble, the eruption of a renewed and intensified war deepens the instability of a region and wider world that is already turbulent, violent, and dangerous. So he's saying, okay, well, you've just made the world a little bit more dangerous. As opposed to what? as compared to what? So again, we don't know what Iran's immediate plans were. We don't know what that meeting was about, and what were they going to do in the next day or two? Was there something that they were going to do, and did the U.S. and Israel get that information, and did they act in response to that information? That's possible because they knew about this meeting, and they also knew who was there, and they were able to target that meeting at just the right time. So it's possible that they knew what was also going to be discussed and so forth at that meeting and so forth. But I hope that this isn't another case where we got into a war because of a lie. I just hope that that's the case. I mean, the Iraq War, we were lied. We were lied to. Not just the weapons of mass destruction either, but a lot of stuff about Saddam Hussein. And Bush said, "Well, the world is better off without him." Okay, but there are a lot of people that the world would be a better place if they were not alive. But we don't go around killing them all. Okay, that was Bush's final. That was baby Bush's final justification. Well, the world is better off without Saddam Hussein. Yeah, that is true, but we, we don't go killing someone just because the world would be better off without them. If that were the case, then yeah. Ah, my goodness. All right. So right now, that's the BBC analyst's point of view, and they're not trying to speculate on that meeting, are they? So I guess I'm sort of trying to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, but he really needs to come forward on what was going on with that meeting. Okay. Meanwhile, now let's see here. The State Department is saying that is now issuing caution to Americans worldwide. And this is a situation that all of us need to take heed, and not necessarily just Americans, but also people from UK and people from the Arab allies as well. There may be, of course, Iran may have sleeper cells, as they're called, in the United States and in other countries that may be activated, but also you always have to consider the possibility of these lone wolf attacks. In other words, people who just act on their own. They actually may be the most dangerous because they're the most difficult for the FBI and CIA to infiltrate. People who just say, "Okay, well, I'm going to take revenge for my supreme leader and plan something and do something." So, as you know, I've consistently asked people who watch this channel not to attend, large meetings, like, or where a lot of people are gathered, such as large sporting events or concerts or things like that. And just be aware and don't put yourself in a position where you might become part of the terrorists' body count, because the terrorists, what are they looking for? They're looking for the maximum body count, right? They want to make a reputation for themselves, and they just want to say, "Hey, look what I did," and take credit for something that is really big. And this is just the kind of situation where someone, in that mindset might say, "You know what? Yeah, this is my chance." So please, please, please be aware and just, be smart, be street smart, be street smart. I know you want to go to baseball games, you want to go to football games, and you want to go to concerts and so forth and so on. But I think for the time being, it's not a good idea, in my opinion. And so I'm asking people to please stay away from those kinds of situations. Yeah. All right, and we don't know where in the world this kind of attack may come from. All right, and then let's see here. Trump says more U.S. military. Okay. Also, Israel strikes Lebanon's capital, Beirut, responding to missiles from Hezbollah. So Hezbollah now, because Hezbollah is uh, allied with Iran, and they've been receiving a lot of support from Iran, and so they want to support Iran now, and so they're attacking Israel. They've been shooting missiles into Israel, and so Israel struck back at Beirut, and so we have that situation as well. So it's kind of a second front in this whole situation now. Hezbollah-Israel war is now heating up again. Okay. All right, so it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime within the next week or two or three. I think we'll be very fortunate if President Trump is actually able to end this within 4 weeks. I'm a little bit skeptical, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe we will see. We will see. We will see. Right. But basically, U.S. and Israel are going to be knocking out all of the sort of the military infrastructure, the police infrastructure, and the drone factories, the drone storage places, the missile factories, the missile storage places, and everything else that might be used to wage war. So it's kind of like the situation that was in Iraq, right? When I'm sorry, not Iraq, I mean Syria. Kind of like the situation in Syria, where basically the regime was left naked, and then someone uh, stood up and said, "Okay, this is my chance. I'm going to go in and I'm going to take over," and he did. And he did. That might be actually an example of where air power uh, effected a regime change, right? But then again, you had to have someone on the ground, right? Someone on the ground who said, "Okay, now I've been waiting for this chance, and now it's my turn to go into the capital and say, okay, I'm in charge now." That's what happened in Syria. We'll see if that's the case in Iran. Well, anything can happen. Anything can happen, right? But anyway, right now they're in the process of making Iran, the regime, completely naked, and we shall see what will happen with that. Meanwhile, let's not forget Pakistan, right? Pakistan and Afghanistan. I think are they still at war? We have to wait. Have to look at here and see. Okay. All right. 7 hours ago, Afghanistan says it thwarted a Pakistan airstrikes on Bagram Air Base. 13 hours ago, blasts heard in Kabul as Pakistan-Afghanistan conflict continues. So apparently, yes, we kind of forgot about them, but apparently they are still at war. And anytime you have a nuclear power such as Pakistan at war with somebody, you got to worry. If push comes to shove, they may decide to use one of their nuclear weapons against their enemy. Okay. Oh my goodness, these guys here. Okay. Explosions have been heard in the Afghan capital Kabul, with Taliban forces saying they opened fire at Pakistani aircraft as the conflict stretched into its fourth consecutive day. This is dated on Sunday. Okay. Afghanistan's Taliban government said its forces deployed anti-aircraft and missile defense systems against Pakistani jets that entered Afghan airspace earlier on Sunday morning. So, all right, that's what's going on there. The New York Times yesterday said no clear end game in the conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Yeah, so someone's got to step in and say, okay, knock it off. But the U.S. right now is distracted. Yes, the U.S. is distracted away from Pakistan and Afghanistan war, but it's also distracted away from China. And when Russia first invaded Ukraine, I said the winner was going to be China. And my concern that here again, The winner here in this Iran war with the U.S. and Israel. Also, the winner is going to be China. Although in this case, I don't know, right? Because China kind of depends on Iran. And if there is a new regime in Iran that does not support China or is even anti-China, that will be inconvenient for China. And if something good is going to come of this, that would be a good thing. That would be a good thing. Let's take another look at the map here. Let's see here. Let's look at the geographical connection between Iran and China. Okay, so it's not exact. Here, let's take a look at this. There's a couple of countries in between, namely Pakistan and Afghanistan, and also, what is this country here? Okay, let's get on. Here we go. Tajikistan also. Okay. Right, so Iran and China are friends, okay? And China and Pakistan are also friends. Afghanistan, I think China is trying to make inroads there, but I don't know about. So basically, though, you got Pakistan and Afghanistan who are at war, and Iran is at war with Israel, which on this map is so small that you can't even spell it. It's right there on the edge on the Mediterranean. But for China, yes, losing Iran would be a major diplomatic loss. Which is but the interesting thing is that China is not lifting a finger in Iran's favor right now. They could be providing, with their satellites, they could be providing intelligence and information to Iran, saying, "Hey, watch out! Here's what's coming," and that kind of thing. But they're not. And Iran, apparently, the regime in Iran is very disappointed at this because they say, "Hey, we've been helping China a lot. We've been giving them a lot of discounted oil, oil at discounted prices." And we've helped them in the international diplomatic sphere and everything like that. And now when we need them, they're not doing anything. And this has been the experience also of Venezuela, of course. Maduro, China didn't lift a finger in favor of Maduro, even though they were supposed to be very, very close. So lesson for Kim Jong-un. Of course, Kim Jong-un doesn't trust China anyway, but anybody else who is thinking of trusting China, these are good lessons for the wise, I would say, that China is not going to come and help you. It's going to be one-sided. Relationship with China is always one-sided, and they exploit. But when it's their turn to do something for you, no. We never get involved in internal affairs of other countries. So yeah, we'll see how all this works out. But yes, that would be one good thing that could potentially come out of this war. Yeah. Okay. And what comes out, in terms of the new regime, if it's assuming that there will be a new regime, we have no idea. And even if it's the same regime, different people. I mean, Venezuela, it's basically the same people, but Delcy Rodriguez, the former vice president, now what is it, acting president, I think is the official title. She's going a completely different course from her predecessor or her. She says he's still her boss, Maduro. So even if it's the same people in Iran, even if the remaining leadership manages to survive and manages to keep their regime going, they may take a different course. Especially if their military has been completely obliterated and police force have been obliterated, and they don't have the power to suppress opposition in the way that they had before. They may decide to take a different course, right? That $7 they were going to hand out. Remember that? They were trying to quell the opposition, the protesters, by giving them all $7 apiece. That didn't work, and so they said, "Oh, forget it. we'll just send the military out and kill them all. And so apparently they killed, thousands, if not more, tens of thousands perhaps, that they killed to put down that situation. Right. All right. Oh boy. So let's hope that this thing can end quickly. I think that is the best thing that we can do right now. Pray that it can end quickly. End quickly. And that God will be able to use this somehow for his will. Right. Remember that in the indirect dominion, God uses the principled results. And so we will see what kind of principled result he's able to pick from this. It's kind of like, picking through feces to find a pearl, but that's what God does. That's what God does. And he's been doing that for a very, very, very long time. And perhaps he can find something this time as well. Okay. All right. This is an interesting headline here. It says Ayatollah Khamenei's assassination will likely backfire. Here's why. This is Al Jazeera. Let's see here. Assassinations give a short-term political boost, but lead to longer-term disaster, it says here. Yeah, I think this is worth looking at. Let's take a look here. We are looking at Al Jazeera. A favorite tactic of war is to try to decapitate the enemy leadership. While such strategies might work in certain contexts in the Middle East, they have proven to be a disastrous choice. For sure, the assassination of an enemy leader might give a quick boost of popularity amid war. Certainly, United States President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are basking in the limelight of their perceived success in assassinating Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. But killing an 86-year-old man who had already been planning his succession due to his ill health is not that much of a feat, considering the overwhelming firepower that the U.S. and Israel together possess. More importantly, eliminating him does not necessarily mean that what follows would be a leadership or a regime that would accommodate Israeli and U.S. interests. Of course, what this paragraph leaves out is that they weren't just targeting him individually. They actually waited for this meeting to happen because it was basically a concentration of targets, and then that's why they killed, they say 48 leaders at once. So it's not just one that they were doing. That is because leadership assassinations do not lead to peaceful outcomes in the Middle East. They can open the door for much more radical successors or for chaos that leads to violence and upheaval. But if a more radical successor is going to come about, that radical successor has to have access to lethal firepower, lethal weapons. And if the U.S. and Israel are going to knock out the Revolutionary Guard Corps' infrastructure, and also not just infrastructure, but also their major weapons, then that may not be the case. It looks like it may not be the case. Chaos, yes. Chaos is quite a likely outcome, I would say. Chaos that leads to violence and upheaval. And this may be what is in Iran's future right now, yes. A brief glance at recent history shows that whenever Israel and the U.S. have tried the idea of leadership decapitation in various conflicts in the region, the results have been disastrous. In the case of Iraq, its leader Saddam Hussein was captured by U.S. forces and handed over to allied Iraqi forces who executed him. This ended a regime that was openly antagonistic to Israel, but it also opened the doors for pro-Iranian forces to take power. That's true, but that was a special kind of situation, wasn't it? I don't know if that would really apply in this case. We'll see. That is a point, yes. As a result, in the following 2 decades, Iraq served as a launching pad for Iran's regional proxy strategy, which saw it build a powerful network of non-state actors that threatened U.S. and Israeli interests. The security vacuum created by the U.S. invasion triggered various insurgencies, the most devastating of which was the rise of ISIS, which swept through the Middle East, killing thousands of innocent people, including U.S. citizens, and triggering a massive refugee wave towards U.S. and Israeli allies in Europe. Another case in point is Hamas. Since the early 2000s, Israel has repeatedly tried to assassinate its leaders. In 2004, it succeeded in killing its founder and then his successor, who was considered a moderate. A few assassinations later, Yahya Sinwar was elected head of Hamas in Gaza and went on to plan the October 7, 2023 attack. Hezbollah has a similar history. Its late leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who successfully led the expansion of the group to a formidable non-state power, ascended to its leadership after Israel assassinated his predecessor, Abbas al-Musawi. 2.5 years of war and mass killing of leadership may now have devastated both armed groups, but Israel has failed to assassinate the idea behind them, resistance to occupation. The current lull in fighting may be the quiet before another storm. In the Iranian case, it is highly unlikely that whoever replaces Khamenei would be as open to negotiation as he was. Was he open to negotiation? I thought he wasn't. I thought he was saying we're not going to compromise on anything. The statements by the Omani interlocutors during the talks in Muscat and Geneva pointed to major concessions in the nuclear issue that Iran under Khamenei was prepared to make. I thought really the president was the one who was proposing concessions, and the supreme leader was saying no. Anyway, it is unlikely that his replacement would have the political space to follow suit. If Israel and the U.S. continue their campaign and really push for state collapse in Iran, what comes out of that ensuing chaos would be anyone's guess. But if we are to go by recent experiences in Iraq and Libya, a security vacuum in Iran would have devastating consequences for U.S. allies in the region and in Europe. That raises the pertinent question of what Israel and the U.S. stand to gain from their decapitation strategy in Iran. For Netanyahu, the assassination of Khamenei is a major success. Facing crucial elections that could mean the possible end of his political life and maybe his imprisonment over 4 corruption charges, the short-term gain in popularity and votes is worth it. Israeli leaders do little thinking and planning on the mid to long term okay. And do not have to bear the consequences of military adventurism abroad. After all, Israeli society is very much in favor of it. But for Trump, the gains are not as apparent. He gets to brag about killing an 86-year-old alien leader of a faraway country to a public that has no appetite for war. At a time of a continuing cost of living crisis in the U.S., he is spending billions of taxpayer dollars to fight a war against a country that posed no imminent threat. Well, he says otherwise, but as I said, we need to know more information on that. A war that many Americans are increasingly identifying as Israel's war. Instead of projecting power, Trump risks showing weakness and being seen as a U.S. president fooled into starting a costly war to ensure the political survival of the prime minister of a foreign country. It is clear for now that the U.S. president has drawn a line at putting U.S. boots on the ground. At some point, he will have to end the bombardment campaign and pull U.S. troops. He will leave behind a disaster that U.S. allies in the region will have to bear the brunt of. U.S. regional alliances are sure to suffer. Domestic audiences are sure to ask questions. This will be yet another U.S. military adventure in the region that will cost U.S. taxpayers money, U.S. soldiers' lives, and foreign policy clout, and offer no return. The hope is that Washington may finally learn its lesson that assassinations and decapitation strategies don't work. And this is a Palestinian journalist writing that story. Okay. Well, okay, that is his opinion, and I think, but he is an expert, and I think it certainly deserves our thought. It's, mhm. But yeah, but if Saddam Hussein had lived, do you think that how would history be different? So are we supposed to sit back and just watch people being killed by their own country's security forces and so forth, and watch these brutal regimes, including China, right? Also China, watch them brutalize their own people. Is that what America is supposed to do? I don't know. Well, we'll see, we'll see, we'll see. Yes, but yeah, I think the role of Netanyahu in this situation is going to be prominent. We will, or people will be asking about that role certainly, and President Trump needs to state clearly how this was not Israel's war, if that is the case, if that is the case, if that is the case. Or let's see here. Let me do this. We have a few minutes left here. Okay. Khamenei's death brings Khomeini's grandson into focus. That's interesting. The grandson of Khomeini, the late, is likely to figure prominently in the deliberations of the clerics who will determine who replaces Khamenei. Okay. All right. Well, this is sort of a maybe could be a story. We'll have to wait and see how it develops. Okay. Uh, President Trump is warning that other U.S. forces are likely to die. I guess he's, sort of preparing the American people for possibility of casualties, because he knows, or his advisors know, that when this body bags start coming home, that is when the public opinion turns against war. Mm. Mhm, 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 mhm. Trump appears to link Iran attack to his 2020 election loss. That's Guardian. South China Morning Post. China always ends up winning when the United States goes to war. Well, even though South China Morning Post is a communist mouthpiece now, but uh, I have to say that there may be, some truth to this. Hmm, we'll see. But of course, China also, China, I think, is going to be taking some lessons from this, and they certainly don't want this kind of thing happening to their capital. Um, and the ineffectiveness of their air defense radars were proven in Venezuela, so they may be worried a bit about what's happening. And the one thing is that how is this going to affect President Trump's planned visit to China in April, beginning of April? Is China still going to invite him? Still going to have him come? We'll have to see. That may be one of the things that uh, will be affected by this whole thing. Of course, I don't know if Trump really will be saddened to hear that he's disinvited. Um, and I don't think that America will really suffer as a result of Trump not being able to go to Beijing in April. But we'll see. That may be part of the diplomatic fallout that occurs. Or Beijing may just go ahead and invite him, which would be a slap in the face to Iran, right? Wait a second, you're our ally, right? What are you doing? But that'll just prove again how unreliable Beijing is when it comes to these situations. Right, let's see here. Democrats thrown into disarray as U.S. offensive on Iran creates cracks. Yes. Yeah, whenever there's a war like this, Americans tend to rally around the president and rally around the flag. Of course, this is, many Democrats don't really rally around the flag these days, but that's still that's think they're still a minority. Yeah. Some hard left Democrats are pushing for AOC to run for president in 2028. I see her on Breitbart. I think that's a great idea. I think that's an absolutely great idea. In fact, if she runs, I might even switch my support from Kamala Harris to AOC. I think I think that would be fantastic to have AOC as the Democratic candidate. Yes, yeah, I will cancel my plan to send $100 to Kamala Harris's campaign and send it to AOC instead. And she's old enough, it turns out. She's 36 years old, and in 2028 she'll be what, 30? I guess 38. I guess, or actually 39. I think on election day in 2028. It's interesting. Just before I have to go, the Constitution, which was, well, 1789, wasn't it? The Constitution was finally set in stone. At that time, the life expectancy was 35, and the Constitution says that the minimum age for to be president is 35. So basically, it was the founding fathers' idea that the president would be someone who already has one foot in the grave. Seems, I don't know. So maybe today the Constitution ought to be amended to where the minimum age is 80 or something like that. Just throwing that out there. All right, gotta go. All right. God bless Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.